If you want to stay up to date with all current hip-hop events and releases, make sure to subscribe and become part of this community. Oh, and also, go cop that fresh merch and listen to my new songs in the description. Joey Badass just released his new album 2000 yesterday on Friday, July 22nd. We've been waiting a long time for this album. It was originally supposed to drop more than a month ago on June 17th, but then he says it was because of sample clearance issues, but I believe it was because Drake dropped. He had to reschedule it, and now we finally got it. He gave us a couple of singles in the meantime to hold us over, to kind of get his name a little bit in the conversation, not become irrelevant again now that he's already pushed back his album. We've gotten 4 singles, 5 actually, but 4 only made the album, that every single one of them that I really liked. I, for example, loved The Revenge, even if it didn't make the album, but then especially, for example, Where I Belong was probably my favorite single, but other than that, Head High was very dope as well, and Zip Codes also, and then, of course, Survivor's Guilt. That is a very personal track for Joey with, Capital Steez's suicide about 10 years ago that he is kind of processing in that song. But all of those are part of this 14-track album, so 10 new tracks that we got on here, and all in all, we're going to go a little bit into the individual tracks in a second, but all in all, this is an amazing album. I already tweeted this and posted this while I was listening to this. I think that this is fire. I think that Joey really came back with a record that is really not for hopping on any waves, hopping on any commercial trends, but staying true to himself and staying true to the formula that made him become the voice in hip-hop that he is today. He is still channeling that 1999 90s boom bap sound style that made him rise to fame, when 1999. Obviously, this album is a sequel to that. It's, as he said himself, 1999's older and richer brother, I think he called it. So we can definitely see similarities there. We have amazing beats on here. If you're a boom bap fan and you're into this neo boom bap, I don't know if that's a term, and maybe I just invented that, but if you're into that neo boom bap that a lot of artists are pursuing, Joey Badass obviously most famously, but also I can only think of in the very commercial sense, like Logic with YS4 that he was going for that boom bap sound, so stuff like that where it's older elements of hip hop and boom bap reiterated with a more modern touch, maybe new flows that are more suitable to listeners in this day and age. If you're a fan of that, the beats on here will definitely you're gonna like this. You're gonna love this. Static Selector also doing a lot of the work on here. Amazing, really amazing. That's really one of the standout things on this album. Every single beat has its own characteristic, its own personality, and that makes the album so special. Now, of course, it's not just the beats. It's also Joey that, of course, comes through with some great penmanship on here. I think at some points it gets a little corny, and I liked, back in the day when Joey was still 17 on 1999, we were like, oh, this dude is ahead of his time. And even on this album, Nas also has a appearance on here, a cameo. He says Joey Badass is, and I also saw this on Twitter, but he said that Joey is the most 45-year-old 27-year-old, so saying that he's ahead of his time, ahead of his age, and that he's just very mature for the state of his career and his life that he is in. And I can definitely agree with that, but I think that also 10 years ago we would have viewed this a little bit differently and been like, oh yeah, he's really ahead of his time. While now some of these bars can come across as corny about meditation or about not letting negative thoughts and energy pull you down, and while all of those are true, and while all of those have definitely a very positive message, and when you're listening to it, it's definitely something that you kind of pick up on, and you're like, okay, maybe I do want to reflect a little bit more on what I'm doing. And this is what this album does for sure, especially only through the lyrics, not necessarily through the instrumentals and the music itself, because those are the 90s boom bap, but through his lyrics, and that's great. at some points it comes across a little bit corny, but that's just a little, it's just a little criticism that I have. But definitely what I just said about you going out of this album and being like, okay, I definitely learned something from this is true, and he even references this on the album, saying that his album is the best investment that you'll make. He's saying like you can buy it for $9.99 off of iTunes, it'll be money well spent and worth it. So I think that's funny that he kind of acknowledges that himself. I also think the features were very well incorporated. We have a couple of them. We have Diddy on the first track, but there's basically just Joey very poetically reciting a verse. We have West Side Gun on Brand New 911, which was definitely an amazing verse from West Side Gun. That whole track is also fire. We had Larry June on One of Us. I was very excited for this feature, but I thought that he delivered. It was nothing too crazy, but he delivered. We had Chris Brown and Capella Gray on Welcome Back, and this is exactly like I said. This is the only track that doesn't really fit this boom bap 90s style, because it's very R&B, very commercially nowadays. So maybe that's the only one that doesn't quite fit. And we have Jid on Wanna Be Loved, and of course Jid, J-I-D, however you want to call him, always comes through with an amazing verse and amazing flow, so that definitely, really added to that song as well. But I think one thing that this album really does, and this is something that I talk about a lot, an album doesn't need to be perfect in itself. That is not the requirement that I, pose to an album to be great. What I like about an album is that if you leave the album, you listen to it, top to bottom, and you leave the album wanting more. You're like, okay, I want to know what this dude has coming out in the future again. And this is not a bad thing. This is actually the best state that an album can leave you in. It's not a great album if you leave and you're like, okay, it's complete, like I don't want more. This has been in itself great. That's great in some moments, sometimes, but I believe an album is really great if you're like, I want to hear the next album. Like I'm going to be hyped for the next album that comes out because I love this one so much. And that's exactly the state that I'm in with Joey. If he can kind of convey his thoughts, his very reflective thoughts that he has, which he no doubt has, a bit more in a not like that corny of a way. Maybe I'm just very biased to not like that, but maybe some people like that. I'm just saying, for me personally, then the next album will be amazing, and this one is amazing already. So I'm really happy with this. I think that he is also very important in hip hop for still making that boom bap sound something that people want to listen to in like this day and age, and making it cool and making it up to date. And that's something that I respect Joey a lot for. And this album is great, even if we waited for it a little longer than we had wanted to. But this album to me is great. So now that I gave y'all my first reaction to this, I want to know what y'all think about this. Did you like the album? Did you dislike it? What's your favorite track? What's your least favorite track? What were you kind of expecting? What did you end up getting? Did it meet your expectations? What is the favorite feature on here? Does it also leave you wanting more like it did for me? And do you think that's why it is such a great album? And was it worth the wait? All of your thoughts on this, please let me know in the comments down below. If you watched this video to the end and liked it, and you want to stay up to date with all current hip-hop events and releases, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, hit that like button, and go follow my social media, and most importantly, join my Discord in the description. Until the next one, you'll have an incredible day, and y'all take care.